probably click record and make sure that it started recording, and it did. So again, my name is Erica Oriens with the Michigan Center for Student Success, and this is the My Best Welcome webinar for leads from each of the community colleges. I want to go through our agenda today. We've already talked about the welcome. I want to talk a little bit about the funder from that we received this grant from, provide you a fairly comprehensive overview of the project that we'll be working on over the next couple of years. We'll talk a little bit more closely about the expectations of the participating colleges, the really immediate next steps, which I will be sending a follow-up email about later this week as well, and then answer your questions. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the grant we received. So earlier in 2019, the ECMC Foundation launched an RFP for various organizations to apply for grants through what they're calling their Basic Needs Initiative. And this is really in response to a lot of what many of you see on your college campuses, but what some researchers and data suggest that basic needs insecurity is really prevalent among students. And we find that in many cases, students' lack of persistence in their programs and lack of completion, which oftentimes we think of as being academic related, are often because of lack of access to basic needs. And so the ECMC Foundation recognized this issue. And as you can see here, they made available $3.1 million in grants to a national cohort of 7 organizations that are working with 2- and 4-year institutions across the state. And of course, Michigan was one of those organizations. Michigan was one of those states, and the center was one of those organizations. As the release mentioned, there were 7 organizations that were identified. And I was really pleased to see the kind of diversity of organizations that are out there. Of course, the Michigan Community College Association is working with the community colleges in Michigan. And then the other Student Success Center, another Student Success Center that's based in Arkansas, and with the Arkansas Community Colleges, kind of a sister organization to the MCCA, also received a grant. But there are several other grantees as well. And we will have an opportunity to learn from those other grantees too. And we hope we'll be able to bring some of the things that they've learned to the work that you're doing as well. So we're excited to be partnering with the ECMC Foundation. We have really enjoyed working with them up to this point to apply for the grant and to really talk about the work that we're doing. And we're looking forward to working with them over the next couple of years as well. So let's talk about why we decided to do this. For those of you who are involved in some of the center's work, you know that over the last couple of years, this issue has emerged as something that we really wanted to focus on. And in the spring of 2019, we asked all 28 community colleges to complete a survey just telling us, and we did this through the Michigan Community College Student Services Association, and we asked those folks to kind of let us know, what do they feel like are the most challenging non-academic barriers to student success? We had 21 institutions respond to that. And in the 7 items that you see on this slide here, we asked colleges to rank them 1, well, I guess in this case, 7 being the most challenging non-academic barrier, and then all the way down to 1 being the least challenging non-academic barrier. And so I wanted to share these results with you. And we see here the top 3: income and employment, food, housing, goods, household goods and clothing, and transportation really emerged as the top non-academic barriers, followed by housing and utilities. And then we see a fairly substantial drop down to childcare, healthcare, and legal and tax issues. So this was just the Chief Student Services officers' perceptions of the non-academic barriers to student success, but this gave us a better idea of what you all are seeing as the challenges that students face. So then we asked institutions, what are they working on? What are their current practices that they feel like they're focused on? And then where do they feel like they need the most technical assistance needs? And so what we did is put these both on the same graph so you could see the relationship between the two. So the line that you see here going across the slide indicates the current practices. So what we're seeing is that colleges are doing a lot of work focused on food pantries or creating a hub for students. They're doing a lot of work around integrating non-academic supports and connecting with community organizations relative to these other areas. But we're seeing less focus around analyzing data, training faculty and staff, focusing on their campus culture, doing some focus group work to understand what students' needs are. And we haven't had much engagement from community colleges to partner with MyBridges, which is the new online tool for Michiganders to access public benefits. And then it's also connected with the Michigan 211 database. Interestingly, when we ask colleges about their technical assistance needs, and what we mean by that is where do you feel like you need the most help, we saw kind of an inverse relationship, which I suppose is somewhat expected. But colleges felt like they needed a lot of help analyzing data, training faculty and staff, improving their campus culture, conducting focus groups, and then we see the other areas there as well where they were asked to rank these, so they're seeing that they need some of that help as well, but to a lesser extent in some of these areas. So this was really helpful information for us as we started thinking about how, what services do colleges need? At the Center for Student Success, a lot of what we do is provide support to community colleges in the work that they're doing to improve student success. And so we used a lot of this information to apply for the grant with the ECMC Foundation, and you'll see the results of that in how we, in the services that you'll receive over the next couple of years. And then the last question that we asked institutions or asked the student services deans was, so how do you like us to do this work? So would you prefer in-person convening? Would you prefer coaching that is available on your campus or potentially virtually as well? Or would you prefer to have virtual learning experiences, so webinars and workshops and that kind of thing that we can conduct virtually? And so our hope was that one of these would emerge as the most popular way for folks to engage with us, but interestingly, as you can see, it almost exactly split a third, and a third. So a third of the people preferred in-person convenings, a third of the people preferred on-site coaching, and a third of the people preferred virtual learning. So that left us scratching our heads a little bit of, okay, how are we going to do all of these things? But we'll show you a little bit later when we talk about our engagement in this project, how we've incorporated this feedback into the My Best initiative. So let's talk a little bit about My Best. So at the center, we like to name our initiatives. We think that it's helpful for us to kind of keep everything organized and straight, to have an idea of what each of our projects are, and it gives us a better sense of being able to talk about the work that we're doing with colleges, but then also with other stakeholders across the state as well. And so we decided to name this project My Best, which stands for Michigan Building Economic Stability Today. We, of course, like to have my is very convenient to put in front of a lot of terms that we use. And so we really like the idea that this focuses on economic stability because of the results that we saw from colleges. We know that this issue is more than just food and housing insecurity. We know that this goes beyond what some might consider basic needs. And so we think about this as more about building economic stability among our students. And then, we have the today in there because it sounds really good when we can say My Best. So that's really kind of the branding of the project that we have, that we'll be using that over the timeline of the project over the next couple of years. So let's talk about our project goals that we communicated in the proposal. So in using the data that we had from the survey results that you saw earlier, and then some of the conversations that we've had with chief academic officers, chief student services officers, and presidents and trustees over the last couple of years, we identified 3 goals. The first goal is that we need to do a better job of understanding the needs of our students and the community. When we've talked with colleges about this work, many colleges have a gut instinct about what the needs are, but they struggle to feel like they have done a comprehensive assessment of what the students' needs are, and really the needs of the community as well. So the bullets that you see under there, I'll talk a little bit more detail about those later, but we will be achieving those goals by sharing self-assessment with the colleges, conducting focus groups with students, conducting a student survey, and then doing a really deep dive into the ALICE report, which is released by the Michigan Association of United Ways, to really understand more about who are our students and what are their needs. Our second goal is to integrate economic stability practices into student support. So many of our institutions, most of our institutions in Michigan, have been involved in student success work with us and with other organizations for years. And we know that providing economic supports to students is helpful, but we also know that those need to be integrated. And when we say integrated, we mean integrated in with the student supports that you're already providing to students. So what we don't want to do is for colleges to set up an office of economic stability and just to refer all the students down there who may be struggling with issues outside of the classroom. How can we do more work to integrate this into the practices that you have at your institution? How can you educate faculty on the resources that are available and help them communicate that information to students? How can you integrate practices into your advising and counseling work on your campus so that in addition to providing students with academic supports and academic advising, that you're able to seamlessly provide them with those economic supports as well? Again, the self-assessment that we'll be doing with the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement will help colleges focus on that goal. We also, participating colleges will become a partner with the new MyBridges tool so that students on your campus can apply for public benefits and connect with community resources. And then we'll partner with the local United Ways and the community networks that you have to build more services out for those students and build the right partnerships for students who are experiencing economic instability. Our last goal is to share best practices across Michigan. So consistently when we talk with community colleges, the one thing that we hear is that one of the best services that we provide at the Center for Student Success is that you can learn from each other. Obviously learning from national experts is wonderful, but one thing that colleges in Michigan, and I think our peers across the country would agree, is finding forums for colleges to share what they're doing with each other. And we have a few different ways that we'll be doing that through the Student Success Summit, which many of you attend, some convenings related to this project. We also are building in some coaching and mentoring, and then, of course, some of the reports and publications that we put out that highlight some of the practices that we're seeing across colleges in Michigan will be another way that we're sharing best practices. So those are our project goals and a little bit about the activities that we plan to do to meet those goals. So I mentioned earlier that when we surveyed the colleges, we see that about a third of people want in-person convenings, about a third of people would prefer virtual learning, and a third of people would prefer on-demand coaching. And so guess what? We just went ahead and included all of those approaches into this proposal. And we kind of agree that colleges benefit from a variety of different ways to engage in this work. So what you can expect over the grant period is that we will have 2 primary in-person convenings that are specifically focused on this project. The first one will be in March of 2020, and then the last one and the only other one we're having will be in probably about March of 2022. It could be April of 2022, but certainly toward the in late spring of 2022. Also, we want to connect with you virtually. We expect to have webinars, something like this, which will probably be 60 minutes long or so. And then we're planning on also delivering for you some workshops, and those will be longer. So they'll be delivered virtually through Zoom. It might be a good opportunity, and we think it would be a good opportunity to pull your team together. We'll talk a little bit about that later as well, where we will have an opportunity where we can do workshops. They're virtual, so you can be on your own campus, but also you'll be engaging with other colleges and then talking amongst your team as well. And then finally, through our partnership with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, we'll make sure that you can get connected with the training that's out there as well, which can also be delivered virtually. And then finally, one of the things that we know that you appreciate is to be able to talk about the issues that you're experiencing at your own institution, and then really talk about that with either expert coaches, and we've engaged with the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement to do that, or with peer mentors. And those would be people, your colleagues across the state of Michigan who are at other institutions, who may have implemented a practice that you're interested in, that you want to get some advice on, or you may have come up with a strategy that you want to implement, but you want to get some advice from a peer mentor before you implement that. So we've included that in the support that we'll provide to you throughout this project. So, oops, I have a typo on here. I'm not quite used to yet getting into the new decade. But for the project timeline, we are kicking this off this month in January of 2022. As I said, throughout the project, we'll have convenings, webinars, workshops, coaching, training, and mentoring. And it actually will end in June of 2022. I'll fix this before I post the slides, but we're not going to do all that in 6 months. We are going to do that over a period of 2.5 years. In a couple more slides, I'm going to drill down into what we're doing for the next year and what you can plan on. But for the duration of the project will be through June of 2022. Okay, participating colleges. So when we launched this project, we reached out to the presidents, I think, or the chief, maybe the presidents and the chief student services officers, and we shared with them our letter of inquiry that we submitted to the foundation, and we said who would be interested in participating. And we were very pleased that 27 of the 28 community colleges in Michigan were interested in participating in the initiative. So this is one of the largest initiatives that we've implemented in terms of all of our colleges participating. So we have widespread participation in this initiative. And I think part of that is for 2 reasons. One, we've been talking about this for a while, and I think colleges were really looking forward to the opportunity to work together on issues they've been struggling with on their own. And the second reason I think that there was so much interest in this project is because last summer, when the MCCA convened the presidents and the trustees from the community colleges, for the institute that we do at our summer conference, we focused on this topic. And the presidents and trustees were able to hear from the United Way. They were able to hear from the folks that do the Alice Report and some of the work around My Bridges, as well as the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement. And I think they had such a great experience at that event that it became clear that this is work that many colleges are already doing, but we're taking a much more holistic approach to that, and an opportunity, as you can see, to learn from the great work that a lot of colleges are already doing. In terms of the project leadership, if I haven't met you before, there you have a picture of me. So I'm the executive director of the Center for Student Success. And also on our team is Jenny Schenker, who many of you know, and has been with the center for a long time as the director of research and institutional practice. And then I'm pleased to announce today that we have a new member of our team who's joining the center. Precious Miller will be coming on board as the coordinator of MyBest. Precious comes to us at MCCA from her most recent position as a campus coach for student success at Western Michigan University. She instituted a holistic model for student success in the College of Education and Human Development, and was an instructor for courses specific to supporting first generation and first time college students. She also is certified as through Gallup as a Cliff Strengths coach, and her professional background also includes removing the barriers for students in public schools and coordinating the care of adults with mental illness. Precious is a graduate of Michigan State University, where she holds her BA in social work and her master's degree in social work, and she's a licensed master social worker. So we are just really thrilled that Precious will join our team this month. She's joining our team, and I think really complements the work that Jenny and I do, and especially with her social services background, I think will be really extremely valuable to us at the center, and will also be valuable to you as colleges, because she has really good experience, as I just said in her bio, working with folks who interact with the various social services systems in Michigan, and also those community-based supports that are available. So Precious will be the person that you interact with quite a bit on this project. You'll probably still hear a lot from Jenny and I, but she will be your primary point of contact, and we will have, we'll get her contact information out to all of you as soon as we start getting that, all the emails and all that kind of onboarding stuff ready. So with that, I'll pause. Precious, are you on the line? Do you have a chance to say hi?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Precious Miller. I'm excited about this project, excited about this opportunity, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Great. Thanks, Precious.
Thank you.
We're excited to have you on board as well.
Thanks.
The other thing we want to do is talk about our project partners. And so, this work we're not doing alone, even though I think Jenny and Precious are both fabulous and have a lot of deep knowledge of the issues and the solutions that we have, that we can share with colleges. We are partnering with 7 other organizations to do this work. The primary partner that we'll be working with, that many of you will interact with throughout the entire 2.5-year project, is the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement. And some of you who have been involved in the center's work in the past probably remember working with Rob Johnstone or Priya Shaplot, who are the two folks that we'll be working with through the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement. They are the folks that literally wrote the Beyond Financial Aid publication that came out from the Lumina Foundation a couple of years ago, and have really, I think, been the national organization or an organization with a national presence who have been focused on this issue for the longest, and the intersection between economic and financial stability in community colleges. So we're really excited to work with them. As I said a little bit earlier, we'll also be working with the Michigan Association of United Ways, and that's the Lansing-based organization, pretty similar to MCCA, that their membership includes all of the local United Ways across Michigan. And so we'll be working with them to do a little bit more work around understanding our communities. They're the folks that publish the ALICE report each year that I referred to. And then they also have been deeply involved in the new MyBridges tool, as well as they have been, for a long time, have been involved in the Michigan 211 database that you can use to go see what community-based services are available. Next, we'll work with Public Policy Associates. And Public Policy Associates is a Lansing-based organization that does a lot of policy work and research and evaluation as well. And they will be, some of you will be working with them because Public Policy Associates will be doing some of that student focus group work that we referenced a little bit earlier in one of the needs and the needs assessment that we did with the community colleges. So Public Policy Associates will be working with a small subset of community colleges involved in the project to conduct focus groups with students on your campus. The focus of those focus groups is really around how students are dealing or navigating economic instability while they're in college, to give us a little bit more understanding of what students are experiencing and how they're experiencing that, and then also what we can learn from that. In the second year of the project, Public Policy Associates will also share with all of the participating colleges the focus group protocol that they used and the focus group questions that they used, in addition to the results of the focus groups that they conducted, so that you would be able to replicate that on your own campus as well. So that's a really exciting part of this work. As you know, it's very time intensive to do focus groups. And so we knew that couldn't be our only strategy when it came to analyzing data and understanding our student needs. And so we're also partnering with Trellis Research. And Trellis Research released a survey that they do, a survey that students complete that asks them about their financial stability and economic stability issues they're experiencing in 5 domains. So it focuses on food and housing insecurity, but it also focuses on other areas like financial literacy and also how students pay for college and student debt. So in addition to focusing on, many of you probably know the HOPE Lab also has a survey that focuses more closely on housing and homelessness and food insecurity. And interestingly, Trellis has funded a lot of that work, but their survey is a little bit broader than that and looks at other domains as well. So we'll be asking colleges this fall to conduct that survey. Our partnership with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services really focuses on connecting with that MyBridges tool. I became aware of the new MyBridges tool early last year. And if you haven't done so yet, I would really encourage you to go out online and create a profile to be able to access the MyBridges tool, which allows Michiganders to apply for a whole host of public benefits, and then also connect with geolocated community-based resources. So not resources necessarily that are, you know, an hour away from where I live, but resources that are available right where I live, right in my community. And there is a really sophisticated referral tool in the MyBridges tool, where referrals in two ways as it impacts community colleges, where you can refer students to community-based organizations, and those organizations are required to follow up with students or with the people that you refer. And then the opposite is true. So you can also become a partner with MyBridges so that other community-based organizations can refer students to you. One of the things that I learned when I was at a presentation about MyBridges is that education and employment, but for our purposes, particularly education, is one of the top areas that MyBridges users search. And so very few of our institutions are included in there as an education provider, if you will. And so we want to make sure that other community-based services understand that they're able to refer students to your college if they're looking for education opportunities. We'll also be partnering with the American Association of Community Colleges Voluntary Framework of Accountability. And some of you, we've been a VFA partner for years at the Michigan Center for Student Success, and we're very lucky that over the last couple of years, VFA has extended the services that they provide to colleges. So not only can you look at long-term outcomes, like completion outcomes after 6 years, but you can also now look at shorter-term outcomes, and you can also look at outcomes like success in college-level courses, persistence from fall to fall or fall to next term, in other factors that are really just going to help us throughout the duration of this project track a little bit more what our outcomes look like across all of our institutions. And then finally, our final project partner is someone who we've partnered with in the past, Dawn Coleman from Coleman Evaluation. We'll be doing an evaluation of our project, and her focus is really on understanding the successes in the implementation of the economic stability work that you've done and some of the challenges that you've experienced. So we kind of refer to this as a critical friend evaluation. So Dawn really helps us design the services that we provide to colleges, but she's also looking at the extent to which sort of a more qualitative approach in terms of what you're implementing at your colleges. So we're looking forward to hearing from Dawn. She's a great partner to kind of as an outside voice to help us understand what's happening with colleges. Okay, let's talk about a bit of an overview of the My Best activities. This is just one slide of a few things that I've already referred to. Like I said, we'll have an in-person convenings in 2020 and 2022. We will have about monthly virtual webinars and workshops. And then just like they are today, those webinars and workshops will also be recorded. Each college will also have 2 coaching sessions from NCII. So the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement will be doing a lot of those webinars and workshops. And you may just decide, like, you know, we need to have a private conversation with NCII about some of the issues that we're experiencing, and maybe they could refer you to other colleges that are doing that work as well. So you'll have 2 coaching sessions with NCII. And then we are extending our mentoring program where we have some resources to support mentoring across institutions so that you can hear from each other, learn from each other, get advice from each other. So formalizing some of that informal mentoring that happens across our colleges, those services will be available to you in this project. I'll show you a little bit later the self-assessment that we've described from NCII's Financial Stability Scale of Adoption Assessment. We will be asking you to do that self-assessment in the next few weeks. We will do that toward the middle of the project, which is actually kind of the end of this year, this calendar year. We're looking at doing that in October and November. So it's not quite the middle, but it's a little earlier than the middle. And then we'll be asking you to do that again at the end of the project. For those of you who are involved in your guided pathways work, the format of the financial stability scale of adoption is very similar to the guided pathways scale of adoption. And so for those of you who were involved in that, this will feel very similar to how you've completed that assessment in the past. Colleges will be able to participate in MyBridges training, and there are 2 different types of training available through MyBridges. You can become trained to help students log in and access public benefits and then get some information back from the system about what services those students have received, and also to help refer students to other community-based organizations. And then, like I said earlier, you can also become a partner where other organizations can refer students to you. And then finally, we'll monitor data through the voluntary framework of accountability in about the middle and the end of the project. We will make that, obviously, you will have access to your own institution's report. But one of the other things that we'll provide for you is a summary of the data for all Michigan community colleges, because we think that it's much more effective for you to compare yourself to other colleges across the state. Okay, so let's dig a little bit more deeply into what this looks like in 2020. So what I've done is provided a list of activities based on the quarter for this year. So today, check, we've got this first one checked off the list. This is the Project Welcome and Overview webinar that we're doing today. After this call today, I am going to send you the scale of adoption assessment, and between now and the end of February, we're going to ask you to complete that scale of adoption assessment that we're calling the baseline administration to get an idea of where you are with your financial stability practices today. Then in March, on March 26th at Jackson College, we will have our kickoff convening. I'll talk a little bit later about the team that you're going to want to bring to that. Between April and June, we are going to have the first of 3 virtual workshops this year. So these are the deeper dives into some of the economic stability work that you're doing. We will also publish these dates pretty soon. Precious comes on board in a couple weeks, so we're going to start working on getting these dates out there ahead of time so that you can get those on your calendar. I would anticipate that virtual workshop will be probably about 3 hours long. And like I said, those would be good times each quarter for you to convene your team. And it is definitely our intention that these virtual workshops would replace in-person convenings. So where normally we would have you come to an in-person convening with a team, think of this as kind of the same thing as an in-person convening, but we're doing that virtually. So your team is probably going to be all together, and then hopefully you'll all be able to connect at the same time to the virtual workshop. For those of you who use Zoom, you know that it has some pretty sophisticated features where we can even put people into breakout rooms and during that kind of workshop. So it can really feel like you're engaging with lots of other people as well. Because we're expecting that all of the institutions will become partners with MyBridges, we'll be doing an overview webinar. I expect that'll be about 60 minutes long, sometime between April and June. And then the folks at Trellis will be providing an overview of their student financial wellness survey so that you have a better idea of what is included in the survey and what the expectations are for participating colleges. I can tell you one of the things that I really like about the Trellis survey is a couple things I like. I like the content of the survey. The other thing I like is that they will reach out to students on your behalf. So this won't necessarily be something that you need to send out as an institution. Trellis will send that out for you. And then they also build in incentives for students to complete the survey. So for those of you who have ever, given away a $25 gift card for students to complete a survey, you know how effective that is. And Trellis does that as part of the service that they provide administering their survey. And then for those of you here on the call today, we're going to have a touch base with the project leads, and that will be virtual as well. But we just want to make sure that we're touching base with you every so often to make sure that we are being responsive to your needs and answering your questions. As we continue through the summer, we'll have another virtual workshop, another webinar that focuses on an overview of the ALICE report that I mentioned earlier. And I think this is strategically placed here in the summer because I think we know that a couple of colleges have incorporated this ALICE report into their fall convening, their fall all-college convening, or their faculty convening that they do before classes start. And so we wanted to make sure that we exposed you to that over the summer. And then, of course, we have our Student Success Summit, which is September 17th and 18th, and we're going to be back over at the Kellogg Center this year. We'll be asking you to submit your VFA data in the fall, and then in the summer, and that bleeds a little bit over into fall, and then we'll have our third virtual workshop. We'll ask you to administer, and we will administer the Student Financial Wellness Survey. We'll conduct those focus groups at selected institutions, and then we'll do this kind of midpoint scale of adoption assessment as well. So we did our baseline here in February, and then we'll do that again in the fall of 2020. So I just wanted to provide you with a kind of overview of what you're thinking for, what you're looking at over this year in terms of doing some of that planning. Like I said, when Precious comes on board, we'll look at our calendars for the rest of the year and make sure that we're giving you a heads up and schedule those as quickly as possible so that you can get those on your calendar. Before I move on from these activities, I think something that I wanted to share with this sort of virtual approach that we're taking with this project, in addition to the feedback that we receive from the institutions, one unique aspect of this project is that you will be hopefully bringing folks on your team from the community. So in addition to typical team configuration where it includes administrators, faculty, and staff, we also want you to bring community organizations to your team as well. And we know how challenging that can be for colleges to bring somebody from outside in, but then also attend statewide convenings as well. So we feel like we've built enough of that in with the Student Success Summit and some of our other points of contact. But we also want you to feel like it is convenient and we've set you up for success to bring in those community organizations. So I want to go through some of the expectations of participating colleges, which will be outlined in the MOU that we share with you. And these are on 2 different slides. So I'm going to go through the first 4 on this slide, and then I'll go over through the next 4 on the next slides, and then I'm going to talk about immediate next steps, and then we'll be ready for your questions. So what do we expect from you to participate? So the first one is to designate a project lead to be the main point of contact for the institution. And for those of you who are on the call today or listening to this recording, hopefully you can check that off, and that's already done. We expect that participating colleges take part in the peer learning opportunities provided through the project. Like I said, most of these are available, or most of these are delivered virtually, and we will record all of those because we know that everybody can't attend everything at the time that we schedule it. But we do expect that institutions will take part in those peer learning opportunities. We're asking you to complete the Financial Stability Scale of Adoption assessment, and then you will also, instead of writing up a report that documents the sort of evidence to support your self-assessment, one of the things that we found through our guided pathways work is instead of asking you to submit an annual report, it's much easier if we conduct about 60 to 90-minute validation calls with all of the colleges so that we can gather the information that we would normally ask you through a written report. It's just a much more effective way to do that. On your part, it's a 60 to 90-minute commitment. And on our part, it allows us to be able to ask more questions of you while we're on the phone so that we can really understand what practices you're implementing. And then we're asking each college to require at least one person to participate in MyBridges training as an access or navigation partner. Much of that training is available online, but you can also do that training in person, and it is available through the Department of Health and Human Services at locations all across the state. But we're asking at least one person to participate in that training. We're asking all institutions to administer the Trellis Student Financial Wellness Survey in the fall. We're asking all participating colleges to submit data to the Voluntary Framework of Accountability, including the key performance indicators for 1-year, 2-year, and 6-year cohorts. This is the same data that colleges are submitting for their guided pathways work. And it is the same data that colleges are, for other projects that we're looking at bringing on board, it's the same data that we're asking colleges to submit for a couple of other projects that we have in the pipeline. So just so you know, you may not be involved in that, this is the same data that colleges are, it's not a new data request. It's not a new data submission. It's what's already being submitted to the VFA. As expected for the grant, we have annual measures of success that we're looking at. And through a very brief survey, we'll ask you to share with us the aggregate number of students assisted and the total amount of benefits received by students referred to MyBridges. As a navigation partner in MyBridges, this information is available to you as an institution. When you log in, you would be able to see this information for your students. And we are not asking you to share individual level information about students. We just need to know the total number of students who were referred and the total amount of benefits that those students received. So really that should just be transposing information that you're seeing on the MyBridges tool and then providing that to us. And then finally, as we do with many of our projects, support our work in the development of BRESER reports on this project. So how that typically works is when we do that scale of adoption assessment and learn about all of the fabulous things that we're doing, if we plan on submitting a report about that, we always like to feature our colleges, and everybody else likes to hear what other colleges are doing. So we'll just ask you if we featured your college to review that information and just to make sure that that's accurate to the extent that we're featuring your institution. So those are really the expectations of the participating colleges. So what are the immediate next steps? So you will receive an email from me, hopefully on Friday, with 3 pieces of information. One is a copy of the MOU that we're asking you to complete, and I have that here. This is a standard MOU that we've used for years with when we're partnering with colleges, and I will ask you to enter your institution's information where I've highlighted. So just enter the name of your college. Like I said, I need to know the lead contact for the project and their contact information. I just went over the roles and responsibilities of the institution. We've outlined our responsibilities, which we reviewed in the project overview, and then I'll just need you to add the name, title, institution again, and the date of the person that has signed this. So we've used this MOU with colleges before, but I will send this to you over email. The other thing is that we'll ask colleges to complete and return NCII Scale of Adoption Assessment. So I'm going to pull that up. Am I going to pull that up? I had it open. Let's see. There we go. So this is the Scale of Adoption self-assessment created by the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement, and it has been customized for the project that we're doing here in Michigan. So you may see this in other formats, other places as well. For those of you who maybe haven't been involved in Guided Pathways work, essentially what this assessment does, and when we say scale of adoption, we are asking colleges to rate themselves on a series of about 20 practices, the extent to which that the college has implemented the practice at scale. And when we say that it's implemented at scale, we mean that the practice is implemented for all students in all programs of study. So if you're familiar with the Guided Pathways model, you know that the work that we're talking about doesn't focus on boutique programs for a specific number of students. We're really looking at campus culture changes and structural changes at the institution. So we'll be asking you to self-assess the extent to which your institution is implementing these practices at scale on a number of about 20 practices. I'll say in here, and I think it's important to emphasize, which is why it's underlined in the document, is don't be concerned if your college has made little progress implementing any of these practices. We're establishing a baseline now. If all of us were at scale in all these practices, we wouldn't need to be doing this work. So it won't count against you in any way at all if a lot of these practices that we'll talk about are not occurring or are not systematic. We actually expect that during this baseline administration, most institutions will be here not occurring and not systematic. The other thing we often learn when we start having conversations about this is even sometimes when colleges feel like they're at planning to scale or scaling in progress, when they start really digging down more deeply and self-reflecting on that, they actually find that many of the practices that we talk about are I think the two words that I really like under not systematic is that they are inconsistent or they are optional. I think that those are really key terms in the scale of adoption assessment as well. So don't worry, don't feel like you need to be an A+ in all these areas right now. That's why we're doing this work. If you continue through the scale of adoption, you'll notice that it is the strategies. There are 4 strategies. Strategy 1 is understanding student needs, and there are 5 specific practice areas under understanding student needs or understand student needs. You will rate your current status for this. You'll talk a little bit about what your progress is and what your next steps are for each one of these practices. So you'll just talk a little bit about, and this can be somewhat informal. It can be a bulleted list here about what you've done and then what your next steps are. Recognizing that there are a lot of practices here and you may not have progress in all of them, and you also may not have next steps right now in all of them, and that's okay. You don't have to be working on everything right now, everything all the time and right now. The second strategy is focused on organizing and connecting supports. So this is where you're really thinking about organizing the supports that you provide to students. and thinking about how you're beginning to think about how you're connecting those with connecting students to those supports. Strategy area 3 is when you're really actually doing the process of doing that connection. So when you're connecting those partners' supports to students, we, again, don't expect to see a lot of practices at scale in this area at this point in the project. And the support that we're providing to you over the next year, we don't expect to be getting into this connecting partner supports to students until we're into year 2. That's when we're really going to start talking about how do we, now we know what's going on with our students and with our community. We know what resources we have. We've done an inventory of that. We have an idea of what's out there. In year 2 is really when we're going to start connecting, or the expectation would be that you're starting to connect those supports to students. And then finally, in strategy 4 is reflective of are you ensuring that students are accessing those supports? So what practices are you doing to make sure that students are accessing those supports? So this is a little bit more broadly focused on how the process of how you're making those connections. So this is, you know, the piece of that, and I really think of strategy 2, 3, and 4 as working together, but are just kind of different components of how students are accessing those supports. And then finally, there is an inventory that I think a lot of colleges have found extremely helpful, some colleges have done some of this work before. Many of them have found this to be very helpful in that strategy area number 2 and strategy area 3 to identify what services are available. And I also think related to strategy area 1, one of the big priorities will be, and you'll find this out through focus groups and surveys, what are the biggest issues for your college? With this many institutions participating in this work, one thing that we know is that the issues that you may find at, you know, or even like the transportation issues that you might find at Montcalm Community College, you know, in rural western, you know, West Central Michigan, are going to be very different than what you might find for a student in the metro area in Detroit. So that's really focused on, you know, do you feel like based on the data that you have, if this is really a critical need for your students, and then being able to kind of assess this sort of inventory of what services you're currently providing. And then lastly, in the message that you'll get from me is start to think about assembling your team for the My Best Kickoff convening on March 26th. So we're recommending that colleges bring a team of maybe 8 to 12 people, and recommending that you bring somebody from the executive leadership at your college, certainly someone from the advising area. Great to bring faculty to this work who, for students who have economic instability, may be the only person they're interacting with on your campus. A new area that it would be a good idea to bring on board is someone from your development and fundraising staff. So colleges that have done this work in the past have thought about how they can leverage development to, for example, build out an emergency, a pool of resources for emergency assistance funds, and your development staff can be very helpful in that process. Financial aid would be another great group. I see I put faculty twice. Financial aid would be another great group to bring, because they're going to be critical in understanding not only the federal aid and sometimes the state aid that may be helpful to students, but other forms of aid that are out there as well. And then finally, bringing in your community partners. We are partnering with the Michigan Association of United Ways. I think most of you have a good relationship with your United Way, so much so that I think some of you, at least one person from your college, probably serves on the United Way board. So that might be a good partner. But I also think other community partners that you've worked with effectively in the past as well would be also good to bring to this convening. And then finally, we'll make that registration link available to you in February, but you're going to want to start thinking about that team. So those are really the immediate next steps. And we have come to the point in the presentation where I can take a drink of water while I monitor the chat to see if any of you have any questions, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask a question as well. So I'll go ahead and pause to see if anybody has questions. While you're furiously typing your questions, I will go ahead and show you one thing that I wanted to show you related to the recording of this webinar and the slides. So if you go out to the MCCA website and click on events, the first event you'll see come up here is the My Best Welcome webinar. And if we click into that, on this page here, you'll be able to see a link to the recording. I would guess we'll be able to get that up probably by Friday. And then you'll also see a link to the slide deck that I have here. So I'll put that on here. One slightly tricky issue with these events is once the events are passed, so after tomorrow, you'll have to click View Past Events, and then you'll be able to see this event will come up first here in January, and you'll have to click into the View Past Events to be able to see those past events. The other thing that I'll mention before we go on to Daniel's question is if we go back to the MCCA homepage, again, you just need to go to the events here. And I don't know why, I must have reordered it, sorry. But I will also encourage you to register for the 2020 Virtual Student Success Network meeting on February 14th from 8:30 to 11:30. We're going to feature 8 colleges. Or not 8, excuse me, we're going to feature 5 colleges and some of the work that they've been doing around adult re-engagement. So if you haven't registered for that yet, I would encourage you to register for that. And then we had one question come in on the chat, which is, what is the estimated time commitment per week for each college? That's a great question. Thanks for asking. So I would say from our perspective, as we look at the calendar, we are planning on having about monthly engagements with all of the colleges. So my response to that would be is our expectation is that for the project specifically, we'll expect that you're engaging during that time monthly, anywhere between 1 and 4 hours, I would say, is because that's when we'll be having the workshops and webinars. However, if we go over and take a look at the financial stability scale of adoption, and we start to look at some of these practices in here, for example, I'll just look at Strategy 1, Practice A. We have identified the number of low-income students at the institution, and we track their retention, persistence, and completion rates. So that may be a practice that you that's going to take at least one person on your staff to spend a little bit more time doing. So I don't know that I would say that it's a weekly time commitment, but I think you could probably go through each of these strategy areas and identify the extent to which you feel like what the time commitment would be for your institution. The work that we are doing on this project is, I think someone said it best, I think, when they said, you really get out of it what you put into it. And so we know that we'll have some colleges that are really able to embrace some of these activities and practices, and other colleges that maybe will be less engaged. So I think it's good to remember that I think you'll get as much out of it as you want to put into it. Any other questions? I'll give it another couple of minutes. I didn't really plan any other anything else to fill up this time. Are there any questions about the team recommendations? And then I guess the other thing that I'll mention is last month, I think it was in November or December, when we invited you all to this webinar, we shared with you a press release that each college can customize that announces your participation in this project. If you didn't receive that press release, please contact me and I can send that to you again. And for those of you who did put that press release out and somebody picked it up, thank you. That was really great. It was really great to see so much attention on this topic and so much interest from the media and really from the public as well in this work that we're doing. I think I'm really grateful that the center can be involved in this work and the extent to which we're able to support you in the work that you're doing, but also elevate the work that you're already doing as well. Okay, while we're waiting for more questions to come in, I'll go ahead and I'll ask, I know several of my colleagues, Jenny Schenker, Precious Miller, Mike Hansen, and then a few of our partners on the project are also on the line. So if you want to unmute yourself, if there's anything else that you'd like to share, happy to give you time to do that. And you might have to unmute yourself. Mike, can you talk now? Yep.
Yeah, sorry. It didn't show that I was muted, but as usual, my staff likes to control how much and when I can talk. So first of all, I just want to thank you for your leadership on this, and also want to congratulate all of our colleges for their interest in this work, and also be one of the first to welcome Precious on board. I think we've got a really good team put together here. I've already had some initial conversations with legislators and others who really believe this is important work and are very appreciative of us taking this initiative to look at these issues and figure out a strategy for identifying and then helping to try to mitigate some of this. So it's really national leading work. You should all feel very good and proud, and hopefully we'll get good results and show positive impact from this work. So if there's, in the meantime, we'll be sharing, of course, a lot of this with our presidents and our board here in the coming weeks and months. But in the meantime, if there's issues any of you have around any of this, feel free to not only reach out to Erica, but me or anybody else at the MCCA, and we're happy to assist. So that's all I really had.
Thanks, Mike. You reminded me, I think that's a good reminder, in addition to the outcomes that we talked about that colleges are doing, since we announced that we'll be launching this work, I've been contacted by a few people at the state of Michigan who are really interested in making sure that public benefits and resources are available to students who need them. As you know, the governor announced her commitment to an attainment goal and to addressing the talent needs in Michigan. And I think that we have a lot of folks in state government, in Lansing, who understand that to be able to get to that goal, colleges are going to need to be able to provide these services to students. So thanks for that reminder, Mike. I think that's a good reminder that folks are really excited about this work. All right, well, I've given it 10 minutes for folks to answer questions. So that's probably a sufficient amount of time to be able to capture that. So hopefully we were able to provide you with a pretty helpful overview of what the project looks like over the long term, what it looks like over the next year, and then your immediate next steps. I'll go ahead and answer those questions. I'll add those questions onto here. Like I said, if you go out to the events page, and I'll link this out to you in an email, so don't worry about writing this down. I am planning to get that out to you on Friday with a link to the recording, with so that you can access the slides with that scale of adoption assessment and with the MOU as well. So look forward to that being in your inbox, and we look forward to probably the next time I'll talk to many of you is when we're all together on March 26th in Jackson. So I'm really looking forward to working with you on this and excited to get started. And just extending Mike's thanks for your leadership on all this work. I know many of you, and I know many of you are very passionate about this topic. And so I'm just really excited to be able to work with you on that. So with that, we'll go ahead and end the webinar for the day, and we will talk with you again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.